What's going on, guys? Welcome back into the channel. Today we're going to be doing a Road to the Show video, and we're going to be covering some benchmarks that are really important for you guys to know in terms of getting called up to AAA and the major leagues in your Road to the Show, and basically just showing you my experiences as I've gone through a couple of different Road to the Shows and talking a little bit about when you get called up, when you can expect to get called up, and all of those great things. So let's go ahead and jump into it, and I want to first talk a little bit about time frame of getting called up to the major leagues, because I've been seeing a lot of comments of varying different degrees of being stuck in the minors in terms of time frame and things of that nature. I just want to say that if you are hitting the benchmarks that I am going to basically rattle off for you later in the video here, you can expect to get called up sometime in late June or early July, maybe even late July of season 1. This can even go as far as August. I've played a few different Road to the Shows, and I've gotten called up at varying different times. This Road to the Show, I got called up in mid-June, and another Road to the Show I got called up in July, and another one where I wasn't performing quite as well, I got called up in August. That's for AAA, but let's talk about MLB. When can you expect to get called up to the MLB? Well, when I got called up in this one, I got called up to AAA in June of 2021, the first season. So advancing through there, I've already played about 2 months worth of baseball, and I am getting a lot of videos and cutscenes talking about how I am really close to the major leagues, and I can tell that I'm about to get called up soon. There is the potential that I may not get called up until early next season, because that's been my experience before. But what I want to say is that Road to the Show this year is a far more scripted experience than it has been in the past. So there are certain points that you have to hit, and you kind of have to go through this scripted dialogue and cutscene stuff before you can get called up. You have to get a certain number of these things in a row before you can get called up. You can't just really get called straight up. And so, I'm looking to potentially get called up here in late August, potentially in September, but I have yet to get called up in the first season. I know that it is possible, but everything has to kind of come together and meet, for that type of thing to happen. However, what has happened to me in multiple Road to the Shows is if I am hitting my benchmarks, I've gotten called up to the major league early in season 2. That is kind of where you can expect to start to be looking to get called up to the major leagues if you are hitting the benchmarks that I talk about here in a moment and you're doing everything right. Now, let's talk a little bit about those benchmarks that I've been ranting about and see, what stats are the stats that you actually want to care about. So the first thing that I have to talk about is a point that I've talked about in previous videos, and that is that your primary position is going to matter the most in terms of getting called up. So in mine, for example, I am listed as a starting pitcher, even though I am a third baseman and I, play a lot at third base. I am listed primarily as a starting pitcher. So my starting pitching stats are going to matter more to the team than any other stat that I have as a player. However, they're not going to discount your other stats. It just means that these starting pitching stats are by far and away the most important thing that they're going to consider whenever they talk about calling you up to the next level. And so my pitching stats are going to matter more than my third base stats. You guys can see when I go to third base, even though they need a third base, I'm not listed there. So that's very important to note before we dive into the benchmarks. So diving into these stats, what are we looking at in terms of benchmarks for getting called up to the next level? Well, from a batting perspective, you guys can see just what I am looking at on All-Star in terms of batting. So in AA, I was batting 374 and 361 here in AAA. So I am batting above 350. I would say if you are expecting to get called up, you have to be batting above 300. If you're batting below 300, chances are good they're going to let you stay in the minor leagues and develop, because that's how it works in real life. If you're shredding it above 300, chances are good that they're going to be looking at you as a potential call-up. If you're above 350, then they can't help but look at you as a potential call-up. Likewise, one thing that I want to talk about is what type of player you are. So as a positional player, for example, I am a slugger, and so they're probably expecting to see power out of me. And so if I'm a slugger, but I don't have any home runs, chances are are good, that they're not going to be calling me up to the next level. You have to exhibit the stats that they are looking for at that position. I know a lot of people choose spark plug. Well, if you choose spark plug, you need to make sure that you have stolen bases. You need to make sure that your on-base percentage is really good. And another thing, whenever you're batting, is you want to make sure that you take pitches and like I said, your on-base percentage goes up, because that is going to prove to them in the next level that you cannot basically get fooled by big league pitchers. Your on-base percentage is huge for getting called up. Now, I know mine's probably not great because I do get fooled on some pitches and stuff like that, but it matters more depending on what type of archetype you are, like a spark plug and things like that. If you're more of an on-base man and a base runner, then those things are going to factor more into whether you get called up or not. But like I said, the primary statistic determining whether you are being looked at or not as a position player is going to be your batting average. You want to be above 350. That's when you know and you can be confident that you're probably getting looked at to get called up, and you're going to start to see those cutscenes talking about getting called up. However, if you are playing as a two-way player, all of your stats are going to be super important to getting called up. So while I am batting good, if I was pitching poorly, they're not going to look at calling me up. I have to be doing exceptional at both sides of the ball. So from a pitching perspective, you guys can see my stats in AA was a 1.39 ERA, and in AAA I currently have a 0.79 ERA. I have more wins than losses. I had multiple shutouts down in AA. As well, I had very few base on balls in both AA and AAA, and I had plenty of strikeouts in comparison to the number of innings that I pitched. So those are all things that you guys are going to want to be looking for whenever you guys play. So in terms of innings pitched, for example, I have 97. You want your walks to be way lower than the number of innings you have pitched. So 2 walks for 97 innings pitched is crazy. 178 strikeouts for 97 innings pitched is twice the number of innings pitched. So I'm getting 2 strikeouts per inning. That tells the major league, or that tells the next level in the organization, that you are ready to get called up to the next level. So you need to be you essentially, from a pitching perspective, need to have like twice as many strikeouts as the number of innings you've pitched. So I recommend 2 strikeouts per inning. That should be your goal in the minor leagues, and that's not hard to achieve if you know what you're doing. And then, from a base on balls perspective, you really want to allow very few walks, because if you are walking a lot of batters, that says that when you get to the next level, you're not going to be as efficient. However, again, it all comes back to your ERA more than anything. You want your ERA to essentially be below 1.5. If your ERA is below 2, you're probably being looked at as a solid player that could be called up to the next level. But, they always expect your ERA to dip when you go from level to level, or I guess increase when you go from level to level. And so, if you show improvement where your ERA continues to improve, like you can see with mine, then that is going to be more likely to trigger them looking at you to get called up. If your ERA is below 1.5, that's elite. If it's below 1, that is insane, and you can't help but get called up if you have an ERA that is below 1 or below 1.5. Again, you have to have the batting stats to match those. So your benchmarks, the 2 most important benchmarks for you, is you need to be batting over 350, and your pitching ERA needs to be below 1.5. And then again, if you are hitting those 2 benchmarks that are the most important benchmarks, and you've gone through more time than I've talked about, if you've gone through June, July, August, September, and you haven't at least gotten called up to AAA, then you're probably going to be stuck in your road to the show, and you might want to consider restarting with a new character, because there are, many stories about people getting stuck in the minor leagues and stuff like that. A lot of stories about guys going multiple seasons and getting stuck. Well, if you're doing all of these benchmarks correctly and you're still stuck in the minors, then your road to the show could be glitched. It's been possible for years now. I've had a couple of friends that hit these types of benchmarks and their thing just gets glitched, and then they restart it and they hit the benchmarks again and they get called up right away. So you just have to kind of play the system like that. You have to understand where these benchmarks are and play them and try to get the best results that you possibly can, and that is how you're going to get called up. So those are my benchmarks for getting called up in MLB The Show, Road to the Show. I hope that this helps you guys out. These have not failed me yet. Every single time that I hit these benchmarks, I have gotten called up within a season and a half. Every single time I've gotten to the major league within 1.5 seasons. Most of the time I get called up right at the beginning of the second season if I'm hitting these benchmarks. Right now in the Road to the Show that I'm doing right now, I am aiming for getting called up within the first season because I want to prove that it's possible. But like I said, hopefully this helped you guys out. Hopefully you found some information in this video useful. If you did, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and comment down below. I apologize, like I said, if you are stuck in the minor leagues. It is kind of crappy. They do need to put some work into Road to the Show to kind of fix these things up and make it more realistic, but that just is the way that it is right now. That's the status of it. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Hope you guys have a good night.